Chelsea 2, Liverpool 1. We're going to be going over the tactics and bits and things that happened in the game from the weekend. A lot to talk about. I've got a few notes here. I want to talk about the press that Chelsea sort of had and what we made of the press, because I sort of said it in the preview that the man-to-man press is going to be key against Liverpool and sort of really fixating on their pressing triggers. And we did that extremely, extremely well, utilising those fullback jumps, which we spoke about in the preview. So don't miss a preview if you want to know ahead of the game what it could look like, because we got a lot of the preview correct. One thing we, of course, didn't get, and nobody really got, was Gusto starting in midfield. But in the preview, we did mention the qualities that Gusto could have that could help in this game, and we saw that within his role in this match. So we're going to be talking about Gusto's role, both in and out of possession. Like I say, the Liverpool sort of out of possession scheme that they tried to go with that didn't really work with how Chelsea sort of looked to build up. The centre-back partnership, very, very strong. Both, of course, went down injured, but very, very good for the time they were on the pitch. Of course, we had Cucurella, who played a very important role as well. We're going to be talking about both Cucurella and Garnacho a lot in this as well. Again, both off the ball and on the ball, extremely important. And then from the bench, we had some really good performances. Hato, really good off the bench. Estevao, of course, brilliant off the bench. Gittins looked brighter off the bench. Big part in the goal in terms of getting us up the pitch. Lavia, of course, as well. Absolutely brilliant when he came off the bench. So let's sort of start with how things looked from the get-go. One thing I sort of wanted to almost like draw attention to is, of course, sort of how much we dominated this game in terms of not only possession. Again, it's not really dominant, 51 to 49, quite sort of even split. But the field tilt was very much Chelsea. We had a lot of control in terms of the territorial control of this game. And that was largely down to the out of possession scheme, but also the control that we sort of had on the ball and how we was able to take over control in this game over Arne Slot's Liverpool, which is something we've done now quite a few times against Arne Slot's side. Now, let's start with the pressing scheme, because we spoke about this in the preview. Like I said, Garnacho jumping on to Konate from left wing, jumping up from left wing. He'd be covering sort of Conor Bradley. But then once this ball is coming over to this side, where João Pedro is now going to sort of cut this side off and almost arc his run to put pressure on the goalkeeper whilst he can't pass back to Van Dijk to go down that side of the pitch. You're then going to have Garnacho make that jump onto Konate, where he makes that jump and Cucurella makes the jump onto Conor Bradley, something we said that Newcastle did extremely well against Liverpool to sort of shut them down that right-hand side of the pitch, where they're having a few build-up issues this season, where they've lost Trent, and even Slot has sort of spoke about their build-up issues so far this season, and it's something that they, of course, want to work on in that sense. But also, another big decision here, starting Gusto in the middle of the pitch, hugely important, because, as I sort of said, one way that they can escape this pressure is zipping this ball into Gravenberch and having those sort of third-man combinations to get through. I think what Maresca was really keen to ensure is that he was never too far away from their man in the middle of the pitch, going man-to-man with the midfield. We can talk about it here, sort of having Fernandes, Gusto, and even Caicedo being able to go extremely tight and man-for-man, so they can't escape the press that we're trying to put on when Garnacho pushes on, Cucurella jumps up, and then, of course, it would be Badiashile on this left side of the pitch. He would jump over to Salah, Chempong would be covering Isaac, and then James would sort of be covering between a supporting role, but also being able to get over to Gakpo if the ball went out. That was essentially the build-up scheme and the idea with this, how Chelsea were looking to press. So having these two extremely tight so that they couldn't then build through the middle of the pitch, and they had to either go long into here, where Badiashile has a little bit of a better advantage because he's got Salah turned on his back. Cucurella can then also sort of use that time whilst the ball is in the air to get back and support Badiashile. Again, very, very sort of effective player at doing that, Cucurella. So this worked really well. Chelsea were able to sort of gain those regains, get recoveries, and sort of make things happen from them and exert control on the game as we sort of expected. Here's another example of exactly what I mean, with sort of Salah on his back, facing his own goal. Badiashile is easier to sort of get in there and make it easier for him to win the ball and win that duel and sort of retain possession on quite a few occasions, or at least put it back into here where you can have plenty of players challenge him for that second ball. So that was clearly the key in this game. On the ball, another sort of interesting factor of this was sticking with the sort of new system, the new idea. Like, if you haven't seen the video, I think it's 2 videos ago now, we spoke about a few of the ideas that Maresca is bringing in to make it a little bit more fluid in terms of on the ball. And one way of doing that is sort of keeping this back four, having these players almost push up, and then you can almost form that two base. So when it's a bit deeper, they'll create this four. When they push up, it will almost look like, say, a 2-3 with those fullbacks. They can be a little bit wider. They can tuck inside a little bit. One can tuck in, one can stay a bit wider. But the idea, of course, then being is that you've got the 4-1 base, but you've got two players here who can drop in, offer support, make it a 4-2, and then the other one can push up and almost be alongside the striker. They can also push up into the half space to sort of create that 2-3-4-1. And there's lots of different ways that you can sort of be fluid with it. And one thing that we've seen a lot of is Fernandes dropping in, Cucurella making the run sort of on the blind side here, and then either Garnacho makes the run into here, and Cucurella can sort of go on the outside, or vice versa. Garnacho can sort of stay pinned wide, and Cucurella can make that run into this big gaping space, especially if Gravenberch, for example, was pulling away, which is something we're going to talk about. So those rotations are extremely key. And I think that the idea behind that was largely to sort of pull this Liverpool front four around. And as we said in the preview, to as well affect this pivot. Because what we often saw, if I sort of go back to here, what you've got here is Enzo Fernandez has dropped in. So you've got your 4, if you want to put it like this, 4 here, and then you've technically got your 3. But Gusto is pushed right up over here. So on this occasion, Gravenberch hasn't followed. So what you've got now is a very easy sort of position for Fernandes to circulate the ball and sort of get his touches and almost try to force these players to jump out. Because Liverpool, you can say, are in that sort of 2-4 front press shape. And it was from moments like this. Now, I think this is this nearer to the goal, or is this just another example of them pushing up, I think? It was these sort of fed passes into João Pedro, where, again, you've got, if we sort of come off here, you've got Fernandes taking Gravenberch a little bit further away. You've got Gusto ready to drop in. Again, you've got that all that space sort of beside Caicedo if they want to drop in a little bit further. And then you've got both fullbacks sitting in these wider positions to actually open up these passing lanes a little bit more. He's in Salah's blind side. So again, if this ball sort of goes into João Pedro, very easy for that to be sort of bang. And then into this space, and Cucurella can step forward on the ball because Salah has lost his man. Gravenberch is sort of away from the play because of Enzo Fernandez positioning infield. And it was an easy way for sort of Chelsea to build out and sort of evade that Liverpool pressure that they were trying to put on. Now, for the goal, this is what's so important, because I think that what Chelsea did extremely well is these sort of moments where they're willing to pull this pivot apart and make space between the second line of engagement, so the midfield, and also then that sort of the third line of engagement, the defensive line for Liverpool. And what we saw in this play, so you got the 4 like this, Caicedo in sort of that normal position, and you could almost make it a triangle here. What we're going to see is very, very clever movement, because Enzo dropping in to now make it a 4-2, whilst Gusto stays a little bit higher, means that McAllister has to stay somewhat over this side to sort of stay with Gusto. Gravenberch is going to jump forward, and he's going to leave a big space, if we sort of move on one, big space where he's just vacated that, because he's gone to press and be with Enzo as he drops into this hole here. Gusto, as you see, dragging the attention of McAllister, and what you're going to see as well is, if we just sort of use a different colour here, maybe blue, João Pedro is pinning both of the centre-backs. So then what you end up with is this big space here, like I said a minute ago. And also what you've got in sort of happening in this play is Cucurella peeling off the back, because Salah is sort of attracted to staying in this area of a high rest attack, so that if they win the ball back, he can go. And then what you have is Cucurella sort of sneaking behind as another part to, again, try and take advantage of this big space in here that they've left behind. This then opens up the chance for Badiashile to, again, very, very good on the ball in this game. He's able to play that ball between, it's not even a big passing gate, but he's able to sort of force that ball through. McAllister is now having to jump with Gusto, but Gravenberch has gone all the way of Enzo, where Caicedo is now the spare man. And this is what happened. I said about this a lot last season, where they sort of press with the number 10 away from, and if the number 10 pushes into the front line to make it a front 2, what it can always leave is if the two pocket players drop deep, you can always find that number 6 with a little third man combination. And we spoke about it last season to good effect. I think it was Jackson's goal against Liverpool came from a third man bounce in the middle from Caicedo. Same thing again. Badiashile finds that ball into Gusto, plays the third man combination here, and Caicedo now has all that space to sort of jump into because, again, they don't want to leave. They don't want. Konate could easily step out to sort of fill this space. But Liverpool is so intent on keeping a +1 in the back line that João Pedro is doing his job by just keeping both defenders back there, allowing Caicedo to step forward. And we know what happens here. The rest, Caicedo's touch into that space. And then here, again, you've got Cucurella's positioning. He's sort of taken up that spot in the box. So now what you've actually got is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, essentially, making runs against a back 4 of Liverpool, meaning that none of them can now jump out to really apply pressure on Caicedo. That's on McAllister to try and get back and put a block in, which leads to this sort of meme area of Van Dijk, which has been memed quite a bit with his positioning here, trying to sort of stop him playing this ball, because if Van Dijk jumps out, then it's easier for Gusto to sort of make that run in behind and get the ball. So Caicedo hits it himself, and of course, what a goal it was. So that was a huge part of this game, and again, you could see the effect that Cucurella. Now, Maresca came out and said it after the game, or actually, I don't even think it was Maresca. I think it might have even been Cucurella that came out and said it, that they were looking to sort of find that double width on this left side of the pitch because they know that Salah likes to stay high in this position. Now, Cucurella being able to sort of drift in behind and get away from Salah and makes Bradley's job really, really tough, because he knows that if he jumps all the way to Cucurella to sort of cut out that space, or if Cucurella makes a run inside and Bradley sort of gets dragged in, then, of course, Garnacho is an easy ball, and he's going to have a lot of time to even take a step in, even 1v0, but then even if Bradley can recover, it's going to be sort of unfavourable for him in that 1v1 scenario. Now, on this occasion, Konate does jump out with João Pedro, and there was a few occasions in this game where João Pedro had a chance to maybe make more of it, but he wasn't able to sort of make it stick, because in this position, he actually loses the ball. But if Chelsea are able to get through this, again, with a little third-man combination, Gravenberch's getting drawn out here, Caicedo here, and you can make that ball. If that can go in here and then get bounced into this space, Liverpool are in big, big trouble, because the space between Van Dijk and Bradley is huge. Konate has been dragged out, and you've, of course, got, like I said, this 2v1 against Bradley. And if Chelsea could have made it stick a little bit more with João Pedro, they could have had a couple in that first half from these exact scenarios. They were really sort of clicking through the gears with the build-up scheme. And again, another little bit of sort of talking about that fluidity, which again, if you haven't seen the video from a few days ago, I'd suggest to go watch that if you want to learn a little bit more about the zone replacement that Maresca is trying to bring into this Chelsea team. Reece James higher up in the pocket, Gusto a little bit deeper on this occasion. So you can see that there's a few sort of affordances for it on both sides of the pitch, although we saw it a little bit more on the left side of the pitch in this game. There is affordances for it on both sides. And I think we'll see it even more on the right when you have the likes of Cole Palmer and Esteval starting together. So that is the main examples that we sort of had from this game. I picked up a lot of images from the first half, because that was sort of the build-up and the pressing schemes that I wanted to touch on. But like I say, even sort of how we managed the game from the second half onwards as well. I think that even though Liverpool made some changes, they brought in Gravenberch at centre-back, they sort of pushed him back, they brought in, who did they bring in at right-back? They put Szoboszlai to right-back to bring in Wirtz, who made some, like he had that flick in the first few minutes, which could have led to something a little bit more. But I just do think that Chelsea dealt with this really, really well, considering as well, both of these players go down injured. And the man management of this to then sort of, right, the first thing to do is Badiashile goes off. So you shift the Chempong over. You put Reece in at centre-back, who did a really, really good job. Again, he's just sort of, he's composed on the ball. He's not going to let the big occasion get to him. And he had a few sort of key moments defensively as well. I think one of them where he tracked Isaac into the box. Isaac grabbed him by the neck and then tried to make out that James was the one that sort of made the first contact. So luckily that led to nothing, because we don't really know what could have happened. I'm getting a bit worried when anything like that does happen now with the few red cards that we've had this season. So Gusto goes to right back, and in comes Lavia, who was brilliant in the game as well. Sort of kept this same idea with Lavia jumping on with Fernandes to sort of apply pressure to this double pivot, and again keep those pressing systems going that we'd seen throughout the game when Badiashile and was on the pitch and Gusto was in midfield. Again, similar ideas. But again, Esteval makes the biggest difference. He comes on and he has some huge moments. And I think maybe we'll go over a video where we just sort of speak about Esteval's start to the season instead of actually going into detail about just his one goal in this game. Because I think that you had the goal, which was brilliant at the end, but you also had an amazing little half space cross, which he's had that in his locker since Palmeiras. He's been showing that, and I knew that was something he was going to bring. And that's a huge tool to have. And it nearly finds where he finds Enzo at the back post, hits the post, and that could have been the game-changing moment in itself, even aside from the goal. He also hit a half-decent shot before that, which got saved. And then again, like even the other subs, Gittins, I thought was good, and he was positive, a little bit more positive when he came on the pitch. Maybe let's just do that to make it sort of a bit more obvious what happened. I thought Gittins was good when he came on the pitch. Lavia, very, very good. And then, of course, as well, a Chempon went off. And I thought Hato, again, really composed. There was a few moments where they tried to really launch that central press on Chelsea when the game was 1-1. I think at that point, it was probably Ekitike up front instead of Isaac. I think he'd gone off. Can't actually fully remember. But Hato was able to sort of evade the pressure from this front four. And sort of, I think there was one point where about 5 players looked to swarm him in the middle of the pitch, and he kept the ball, sustained pressure, got the ball through to your likes of Fernandes and Lavia, who was making things tick. And again, Guiu had come on at this point as well, which I've just realised he's not on the screen, so just imagine this is Guiu. But I just thought all the subs were extremely, extremely bright. I really didn't have anyone from this game that I could point out and say they were extremely poor. I think everybody stuck to their role really, really well. I think the idea to play Gusto in midfield, I think that's one thing we actually didn't really speak about, is Gusto's role not only to go man-to-man with McAllister, but if we just quickly shift, I'm not going to make every single change again, so just imagine everything's from the start. But Gusto playing in this midfield role, again, the idea was that if these players got dragged out, like Canate did on occasion that we saw when Gravenberch got dragged out to Fernandes, and Fernandes dropped a bit deeper and Gusto stayed a bit higher, the idea was to put central runners, which is something Gusto can do, in position to make those runs in behind. Because if Canate gets dragged out, like we said earlier, where he did on a few occasions, if we go to maybe here. Yeah, here. Now, yes, this is James on this occasion, but if we got different examples, what you could see is Gusto was looking to make that run and stretch the play. And that's something he brings you because he's extremely mobile, he's extremely energetic, he's got an engine on him. And it can allow Chelsea to exploit these gaps when Pedro does what he does best and goes for his sort of what his instincts are to drop deep and get on the ball, because he is that sort of number 10, almost 9.5, where he wants to get those touches in deeper areas. And what you need to exploit that is those runners. Now, yes, you had Garnacho, who was looking to make those runs in behind, especially on this left-hand side. You had Neto doing it on occasion as well. You had Esteval, when he came on, was making those runs too. But Gusto in this position, I thought the game plan was very, very clever to have him in there, not just for the out-possession role that he did on McAllister, but also to make those runs in behind and stretch that defensive line when Pedro dropped in. Because if you start, let's say, Lavia in there, now, yes, if Lavia was fit, probably does start in there because you can see just how good he looks on the ball. But when you're trying to sort of make those clear build-up patterns work, you need to have that runner in behind. And I think having Gusto in the middle of the pitch, not only for his out-of-possession role, but for this, made a lot of sense. And his off-ball movement is extremely good. We saw it for the third-man combination for Casado's goal. His movement and his IQ in the middle of the pitch, even though you kind of want to stop him receiving here, because yes, we've seen him on a few occasions make a loose pass or a loose touch, and it allows these players to get on the front foot, 4v4, essentially, if you play him in that deeper area. So I think having him as the higher player, dropping Enzo in here, and almost having it look like this at times in like a 4-2-4, where Gusto could be the one to make those runs in behind, I thought it was very, very genius from Enzo Maresca. And I think it deserves a lot of praise for the decisions that he made in this game. So I think every single thing was more or less spot on, and really, really good to go into the international break after this game. So let me know your thoughts on this one. I will do a lot more videos for the international break. Maybe we'll look into some sort of specific players. Like I said, I want to go into a lot more detail talking about someone like Esteval. Maybe we can go through all the new signings and speak about how good they've been. I'd like to go into a bit more detail about Casado so far. I mean, there's so much to talk about. So let me know things you want to see throughout the international break. Drop a like to support the video. Any questions, I'll try and get back to them as well. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.